Hi, welcome to the Bougie in a Backpack podcast. My name is Angel Trin. I'm the founder of Pennywise Traveler and the co-founder of Bougie in a Backpack, and I'm so happy that Delia is here today. So for those that don't know, Delia was one of our speakers for our Bougie in a Backpack virtual summit in January, and she'll be talking today about how she became a digital nomad. Hi, Delia.
Hi, Angel. Thank you so much for having me here and for having me on the summit. It's been a big pleasure. I've been looking forward to recording this.
Awesome. So do you want to give a little introduction about yourself?
Sure. Yes, as you said, my name is Delia. I'm originally Italian and also half German, and I've been a full-time solo traveler and digital nomad for the past 9 years. And I've built my online career around my passions and my experience and expertise. I come from the world of languages and communication, so I'm an interpreter and translator, but I've started incorporating my real purpose projects into my business, which is mindset and mindfulness coaching and traveling and digital nomadism as a lifestyle that I teach and that I help and empower people because there's more and more nowadays.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear. I'm just kind of curious. So you speak 6 different languages. Like, how did that start? Like, was your school like teaching you guys all those different languages? Did you learn on your own, or how did that begin?
I know it sounds like a lot, but I grew up speaking Italian and German at home. Because my mom's German, dad Italian, and I started speaking English when I was 6 or 7, but my teachers in school were Italians, and I told my parents, this is not a proper way of speaking English. I want a native. And then in my little Italian hometown, there was just one old Scottish woman who was a native. And I'm like, okay, I'll go to her. And then I started, paying her for private conversation classes. So by the age of 8, 9, I was already fluent in English and nobody else was there, but I was so passionate about it. Like, I can talk with anyone around the world with this language. It's beautiful. And then Spanish came. And then, I practiced more and more Spanish during my travels because it's so similar to Italian. And then when I went to Brazil and Portugal, I realized that I could already understand through the Spanish. So I learned Portuguese. And then last year, same with French when I spent a month in Paris. Like, this is so similar. Why don't we leverage the languages that are similar to our native one, like to our first ones? So I'm like, okay, I'm lucky because Italian is similar to other European languages. So I'm not like a talent in a sense that I speak like Chinese, Japanese, Russian, and whatever. They would require more studying. I did study Russian for a year and I realized, okay, this, if I want to speak it fluently, it's a lot of vocabulary learning. When I tried to learn French or Portuguese for the first time, I don't think it was that hard for me because the words were so similar to Italian. So 6 languages seems like a lot. And I did study interpreting and translation at uni. So I have this background and 5 years of Greek and Latin at high school. So that there is this linguistic brain of mine, but I don't consider myself like a proper talent because I know people who really started from scratch, like completely different languages, and they have all my admiration. I don't know. I consider it normal what I do.
I mean, I think it's very helpful for business, especially if you know English and Spanish. If you add Arabic, that would be really good too. Then you can just travel easily through the Middle East as well. But that's pretty amazing to hear. Also, it's like, before you became a digital nomad, do you want to talk to your story about like what made you become one for becoming a digital nomad?
Yeah, this is an important question because my whole life, I always say that I was born and raised a traveler, right? Because my parents, they were big adventurers, my dad especially. And when I was 12, 13, I was already traveling with my family to really exotic destinations and spending weeks in the jungle in Costa Rica. I'm like, okay, this is the life that I want to live. Let's just finish my high school, college kind of normal path, and then I just want to be an adventurer. But when I was at college, I was in a relationship, and then that age in Europe, or at least in a small town, you think, okay, maybe this is the normal milestones. You graduate, and then you get married, and then you buy a house and have kids, and that was kind of the direction my life was taking when I was in my 20s. But I was that close, probably, to getting married to this long-term ex of mine when we broke up. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm actually free because I don't have a home that I'm paying for. I work online. I don't have kids. I'm 25, 26. Like, maybe I could live the life that I always wanted to live, which is traveling. So I started in 2016 inventing it because I had no reference. There were no nomads in my life back then that I could ask. I was just improvising and learning by trial and error because lots of things that I've done at the beginning were just mistakes. But then I figured out, and I never went back to living to Italy or to Germany. I'm like, this is so cool. I don't need to stay anywhere. I can just keep moving and keep flowing. And then my group of friends expanded, and I had people hosting me everywhere, and then I could feel home everywhere. But so at the same time, you have this sense of belonging somewhere. If I feel so familiar in so many different cities and countries, but then there's also the part of you that wants adventure. So every year I keep going back to some countries where I really have important friends and family, but I also every year go to completely new countries. Years, they're just flying so quick. I think we have another 2 years of plans if I don't slow down. Yeah, it will be even more. I could just, yeah, don't see an end to this.
Do you want to talk about how you maintain that, like the different like side hustles or income streams that you do to maintain that to become a digital nomad?
Yeah, at the beginning it was not very diverse because I graduated and I was a specialized medical translator. So I was focusing on what I studied, which that's what you should do. And there was a lot of work back then, even throughout the pandemic. So medical translations were needed, and I could do it everywhere. So we're super grateful for what I had studied. But then it was getting repetitive, and then it was getting even more boring because machine translation was pre-translating most of the text, the documents that I was working on. So I was just doing proofreading, editing. I don't want to spend my entire life sitting in front of the screen proofreading documents. Like, I want to be creative. I don't want to check that someone else's manual or text is perfect. I need to say something. I need to bring out something that I've seen with my own eyes, because I was experiencing the world so intensely. I was learning, I was growing and working a lot on myself. So I got really, really excited about the neurosciences and personal development, and then traveling and different cultures. And how can I bring all of this together in a way that makes sense professionally, but also personally? So it kind of became a response to what people were asking from me, because there were so many people constantly asking me for travel consultations. Like, oh, I want to go to Brazil, Guatemala, Thailand, Mexico, Vietnam, whatever place you've spent enough time. Can you help me organize that? Can be a few calls. It can be one call. It can be, oh, I want to do a gap year. Can you prepare me in the months before? Like, different people having different requests. And I realized that I could actually answer these questions. And I was enjoying this. And I was empowering some people to travel alone for the first time, to take a sabbatical for the first time. It was like a way to give back, but it was helping them and it was helping me. And I loved it. And then I realized that I could express my creativity through visual content creation. So I started collaborating with brands and tour companies and anything related to traveling. And it was another way for me to experience amazing things for free or being paid for. And then slowly, then the mindfulness coaching, and now I'm doing a yoga teacher training next month, like different things that I love that can become part of my career. Because nowadays it is really true that you are your niche, you are your personal brand. Whatever really makes you feel alive and happy is contagious for people around you. And if you've spent more time or more energy resources than others, then you are the reference person for them in that field. And I didn't know I was until I got all these requests. Oh, I want to be a nomad too. Or now we can work from home, but I don't want to be home, but I don't know where to start. Can you recommend me places in the Canary Islands or in Portugal or no. And then I was connecting people and leading little workshops and gathering questions. And now I'm working on trying to create a structure to convey this message, maybe a course or some downloadable resources, because it's a lot of questions. But at the end of the day, I think everyone wants the same. Everyone wants to be guided and feel safe in a few important aspects. Because then once you start traveling, you figure things out on your own. But before traveling, everyone pretty much has the same questions. And it was an honor for me to be asked for. But I think when I started sharing on Instagram, the goal was simply to keep like a diary, to just for a family. It started like that. And then I saw people that never met me in real life following me. And I'm like, okay, people usually follow someone else because they want something out of it, right? It's not because people have just time to waste scrolling. It's because it's giving them something to realize, okay, then it becomes kind of your responsibility. You want to provide value through your content. You want to give education, inspiration, not just the influencer vibe. Like I really don't like that. And it makes me even feel guilty to, always be in sunny places and working from a hammock. But then if people keep telling you, oh, thank you for motivating me to, question my life, doing this, and instead of criticize, like I never really experienced anything like hating or these kind of comments. I was lucky, maybe because my community is still kind of small and compact, but also maybe it's the way that I try to express things. Like, don't do this. Like, don't copy me. Find your own way to enjoy your life, your career, and your travels. It can be just a few times per year. It can be working from home and then sometimes doing our work. Like, anyone needs to find what works best for them. And the important thing is to listen to your needs, your physical and emotional needs, because we're all at different stages. Even the same person gets through different phases. What we were saying before about, oh, I was getting old, we want a bit more comfort. Of course, if you're 20, you can go to a hostel and you even have fun sleeping in a dorm. But then when you're 35, you know, you don't want to share a room with 15 people who are drunk or loud. So it's all a journey within a journey that we figure out by ourselves. But getting help to get started, that's probably what makes a difference sometimes if people actually do it or not.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So when you first started out traveling, like becoming a digital nomad, your main source of income was kind of like just giving travel consultations of like, hey, how did you make money while traveling? What have you done so far? Where have you been? How can I start a sabbatical? Just like how you...
No. The
Yeah.
beginning was just doing the translations, being a linguist, because I didn't have all that travel experience. Now it's more about travel consultation because
I'm
I've been to
confused.
almost 70 countries. So everyone who wants to go on vacation, there's a high chance that I've been to that place before or multiple times. So, and usually it starts with it started with the people that I knew for real, but now even people I've never met. Like, it happened like the last client that I was on calls with organizing their honeymoon. They just saw me on Instagram like 2 weeks before, and they just reached out and they said, we want you to go through our itinerary and give us first-hand recommendation and that. And I felt like, wow, this could be a full-time career if I advertise it more and reach out to people more. It was kind of a side thing, but it's so aligned with what I want. Like, I want to help people and I want to leverage my knowledge. And these people, they were super thankful. So like the vibe was really high. Everyone was happy after this this work that we've done together. So yeah, if you want to ask me now, what's the main focus? I would say coaching and consulting people and working with real humans instead of just documents and files and content and writing and all of that kind of digital thing. I really love connecting with people and listening to their needs and see what I can do for them.
That's amazing. So like, I just want to make sure I get the story right because I don't want to mess up. But like, you first started working remotely from the linguistic stuff because that allowed you to work remotely. And then as you started doing that, because you were traveling to different countries and you started exploring more, people started asking you like, hey, like you traveled to this place and this place. Can you give me advice about that? And that's how you started consulting, because like once you got to those other countries, you knew what they were about and how to get there and all different like little tidbits. So that's how it all started, just from the medical billing job where you're transcribing.
Translating. Yeah, it's true.
Translating. Yeah.
Yeah, you might think that now with AI or ChatGPT or Google, people can find free travel advice everywhere, which is true. But I'm surprised that people now, they really need people. They like the human touch, the authentic experience. And I'm like, why are you paying me to ask me these questions? Because I know that you've really been there. I know that you've taken that ferry And you might tell me, is it really bumpy, or is it really as, I don't know, uncomfortable as some blogs say? Like, I want the real. I don't want just this standard, okay, the boat is leaving at 5 p.m. I want someone who's been on that boat telling me how it is. Like, seriously, like super specific questions like this. Or they know that I have a huge community around the world of digital nomads that are my friends. So they know that if they travel to so many different places, I can just mention one place, Medellin, Colombia, or Thailand, or Mexico. They know that I know people who live there. So many times I've connected people. They've rented out places or cars or created events. They started collaborating. Like, the power of human connections is endless, because you never know who you could be helpful for or who can be helpful for you. And this skill sharing thing, that was what we were saying before, Cole, why I love attending digital nomad conferences. Because before that, I was this solo traveler, not really fitting anywhere, but making herself home everywhere. That's great. I never feel lonely. I really love just being by myself and then making friends with local people. Language is helping that. So I'm fine, like, just talking to local people or not talking to anyone. But then I was stuck, like, in my career, because I was just living day by day and enjoying places. I didn't have a vision on like how to see this as something bigger than myself. But then I went to this to the Nomad cruise, completely skeptical at the beginning, like, oh, I don't want to be celebrating and glamorizing our lifestyle, but it became such a conscious community. There's so much self-development work happening there. Like, half of the workshops are about optimizing ourselves as humans, not just the business and the money making part. Absolutely. There's so much depth, and you really find your tribe within that bigger tribe. And you keep meeting these people around the world. You don't even have to travel with them, because they get, for example, after the last cruise, we went from Canada to Japan, 300 people. 300 people start traveling around Japan and around neighboring countries in Asia. So wherever I was going by myself, I was bumping into them. Sometimes not even willingly. Like, we were just meeting randomly, like bumping into each other in cities like Seoul, Korea, like 18 million people. You just bump into your friends. Same things in Tokyo, bumping into your friend. Like, it's such a huge, wandering family. So you never really feel alone anywhere. But then the conversations with these people, can you imagine how interesting they are? Because you travel, they travel, you exchange about places and the insights, and they have this same lifestyle. So you don't have to justify yourself, explain yourself of why you're not home, why you're not settling. Like, you don't have to justify it, because they get it. They are the same. And if any of us at some point decides to settle down somewhere, it's beautiful. It's totally fine. But as long as you want to keep going, there's someone supporting you in that. But also on a professional aspect, there's so much skill sharing there, and people who are ahead, they help the other ones, and it's all for free. Like, they give workshops on the cruise, and talks, and on conferences, and sharing circles, and masterminds, just really to inspire others and show them what worked for them, so that the new nomads or nomads who are changing topic in their career can learn from them. And it's really powerful to see this collective energy. Every time I go to this event, I create more afterwards. I partner with people. We create podcasts and content and ideas and courses. And it's something that I was not having when I was traveling completely by myself. So if your goal is just to go on a backpacking trip, then don't even bring your laptop. But if you are a nomad or you want to be location independent, being around like-minded people is key.
No, I definitely can see that happening. So like, when you did the nomad cruise, what made you, were you thinking about, like, when you first heard about it, did you buy it right away, or did you wait a while to buy it?
No, the first one, I was from Spain to Brazil. I was living in that island in Spain, Tenerife, and I wanted to go to Brazil for Christmas anyway, like for the winter anyway. And plane was kind of expensive. And then a friend who owns a co-working space in Tenerife told me about the cruise. And I'm like, yeah, but maybe there's a bunch of like new nomads who just want to get drunk on the boat. It's not for me. I went to a conference in 2018 and for nomads, and I didn't really enjoy the vibe that much. So I avoided the bubble for so many years. But somehow I was curious to see, like, you can't really judge things that you haven't seen in so long. So without expectations, I joined that cruise in 2023, and I was mind blown because it was so much better than I thought. And of course, you cannot make friends, like best friends with 300 people in 2 weeks, but with some, for sure you can, because you're literally on the same boats. Like, we were crossing the ocean and spending intense days together of growing and learning and sharing and also experiencing the world. On the next cruise, we will go from Seattle to Sydney, and we will stop in Hawaii, Fiji, Samoa, Vanuatu, the South Pacific Islands. Like, this is not the, trip that you do just every day. It's like a special part of the world, just surrounded by the ocean, and you're there with your friends in this heavens. And at the same time, though, there is a co-working area with Starlink, and people are making sales calls and talking to audience. It's surreal. It's not something you see elsewhere. So it's a really good mix between experiencing the world and having fun and building a professional network. If you think of normal work conferences, what do you think? People with, wearing suits and just, standing somewhere, doing a little small talk and then sitting and just attending a conference. And I don't know, maybe there's a party in the end. But a conference that is on a boat for 2 weeks, it's an experience that you have to try to understand the level of just human connection that can arise there. In one moment, there's this super successful online entrepreneur teaching you something, you're there taking notes. A moment later, you're both in the hot tub, laughing and dancing and just realizing that we're all there because we have something in common. So we're connecting over the similarities and no matter the differences. Someone is really at the beginning of the journey and someone is the literal owner of the thing. And we're all just at the same buffet having breakfast together. So this is really inspiring.
So when you did your first Nomad conference, the one that you didn't like, how'd you find out about that one? And like, how did you find out about the Nomad?
Yeah, that was my early ages. I mean, there were already some nomads around the world, of course, in 2017. It was a smaller community. I think really everyone knew each other probably. And it was in Thailand, in Chiang Mai. There were already co-working spaces there. Maybe there have been even years before, but that's when I started. 2016, I started. 2017, I find out about these conferences, and I flew there early 2018, and it was my first one-way ticket to Asia. And, I've done what everyone, like every backpacker does, like going one way to Asia, and then you just spend months traveling all over and, doing like 10 countries in a row and never stopping, like never really settling somewhere for more than a few weeks. But I was working, and I remember being surrounded just by backpackers on a gap year or spring break or whatever. And back then, the few nomads that I had met at that conference, they were mostly staying in these co-living spaces or expat scenes, expats bubble, maybe in Bali or maybe in Chiang Mai. But I was really on the road with this laptop, not really knowing how to take care of myself, because someone who's working has different needs than someone who's just traveling, completely switching off the brain. And then I made mistakes and I burned myself out a few times, missing deadlines because of crazy time zone differences, or being awake at crazy times because of these time differences, and just like not really listening to my body, and then feeling more and more isolated because this job that I had was just very mechanical. I was just, processing, editing these texts, and I couldn't really connect to the backpackers around me because, they were younger and they were talking about different things. And I was in between worlds. So then when I went back into the scene and I found so many really soulful nomads, I realized I belong somewhere. I can connect so quickly and so deeply with these people because they're not 18-year-old drunk backpackers. They are professionals, but they're also in love with the world and with freedom. Now they are my best.
You give a really interesting perspective because it's kind of like when you think of like, let's say like kind of like your example of like just backpacking, you're like, oh, like I don't need to pay for a conference. I'll just meet people at the hostel. But then like you said, you meet those kind of people, like the people you meet at the hostels versus actually having a community where like maybe you paid a little bit more for the conference ticket. Maybe it was like a few $100s, but you met people there that they were actually inspiring you to do what you wanted to do full time. So it's like you kind of get what you pay for in that sense.
This is so true. I mean, if you go to hostels, there are people who work nowadays, or you can just go to a co-working space for one day or a co-working cafe. You can meet these kind of people without doing a conference, of course. But if you spend more days with the same people, then you obviously get deeper. And then if it's something like the Nomad Cruise, where then people spend weeks or months around the same areas and you keep bumping into each other and you already have the memories that you made on the cruise. Like last year in South America, I kept meeting people around Brazil and then in Argentina and then in Peru. And then when I was flying back to Europe and I had a layover in Florida, I was hosted by some friends that I met on the cruise in Florida. It's just this big family spreading. And I was talking to some of them recently because we were having reunions in Asia, all over Asia. And they were saying like, actually, we started the year together in Brazil. Yeah, true. We spent New Year's in Copacabana. But then, then we met again in Buenos Aires. Yeah, true. And then, we met in the summer again in Europe. So like you keep meeting the same people throughout the year in different continents. And it's just, I'm not and it just feels like family at some point because you see them more often than you see your own parents.
No, sure. Well, 'cause it's kind of like, I guess that's the way I think about it in that kind of sense. It's like some people think that like, oh, well, like I can just test it out for a day or two and go to like kind of like you're saying, like a co-working space. But when you kind of do that, sometimes you're not really getting the real like, because you get those kind of people. You don't always get the people that you meet at the Nomad Cruise where it's more like deeper. Like, you just get people that you might have just met at the co-working space, but it might not be as rich as like the Nomad Cruise. Because it's not like, because some of the people who go to the Nomad Cruise, they built like full-time businesses, they started from scratch. You meet more like people who are more intentional versus just at the co-working space that you mentioned.
Yeah, sometimes at the co-working, you meet people who are remote workers. So instead of working from home, they go to a co-working space, but they have more of a steady life. Like now there are many co-workings everywhere. And it's totally fine. I'm not saying if you live somewhere, you have a home base, then you're not a nomad. No, there is no definition. Some people on the last Nomad cruise, they've never been nomads. They went on the cruise to learn and to see, is it for me or not? And some people have not had a home base for a decade or more. Everyone is welcome. It's a very inclusive space because in the end, we're all figuring it out. And it depends on the phase of our life that we're currently living. So the beautiful thing, as you said, is you find people who intentionally choose this lifestyle. And the beautiful part is that everyone does a different thing. So we have the same values, but everyone does a different thing work-wise. Mm-hmm. So this skill sharing thing, like someone has a podcasting company, someone has a marketing agency, someone has a photography business, and someone is a programmer, developer. So imagine like you say what you need and there's someone there that can be your next partner or client or coach. I hired like 3 or 4 coaches after the first cruise. Like I need to work on this and this and this aspect of my life. I want you. Instead of just picking random people from the internet, like I know you from real life. I felt your energy. I want you to be my mentor. I want you to be my therapist. I want you to be my coach in all the different areas that I needed help. And that made me grow so much on so many levels within the last year.
No, I agree with you because it's like there's nothing wrong with going in a co-working space, but I think like going to the conferences kind of like it's more intentional because there's more like that these workshops are going to be happening, and that the people that go to these workshops, they kind of have like the same mindset because you're going to that workshop specifically designed for the Nomad Cruise. So I think it's more know in that sense too, because then
Yeah.
you'll find people there. Versus in the co-working space, there's nothing wrong with that, but you just don't know who you're going to meet there. Versus this is very carefully selected. This is all the talks that they have at the Nomad Cruise or Nomad Fest or whichever conference it is. It's very intentional.
It is. Yeah, after this last Nomad Cruise, it ended in October in Japan. A week later, I went to another Nomad conference in Japan that was organized by Japanese people. And it was so interesting to see this nomad scene in Japan starting and how they want to open the country to foreigners and what they were doing to involve us and explain us their culture. And then I went to Koh Phangan in Thailand, and then there was a nomad conference there, which was different because then it was island life and beach life and Thai culture. But then at the end of the day, I met the same people throughout all these events, and you realize it is a movement that has the same values, but endless options and endless freedom. So the thing that I enjoyed the most is that at each of these events, there was not just space, but prioritization around the topics of self-growth and not just business growth. Because business growth is just a reflection of self-growth. I think once you expand your vision and your capacity to deliver, to focus, to receive, to connect, then you're gonna experience an expansion and an elevation in your career. You cannot just focus on numbers and, forgetting everything else. It just always starts within. So I was given the chance to host workshops or talks at these conferences that were just about mindfulness, and they consider it as important to have someone talking about the mental aspect, the psychological aspects of being a nomad, a full-time traveler, and how to take care of your mind and body. And I'm like, wow, at a business conference, maybe there would not be a lot of space for this, but here, this is welcome. And some of the most attended workshops were around secure attachment and love and relationships, money wounds, and inner child and self-worth issues. Like, this is like deep inner work. And these were super big workshops where people were sitting on the floor and taking notes. So it's a really inclusive space. As I said, it helps you grow in so many different directions. So if anyone is kind of skeptical, they should give it a try. Some of the communities are really good nowadays.
You want to tell us the one that you didn't like, or you don't want to tell us the one that you didn't like? The one that you went
No.
to?
No, it was too long ago.
It might have changed by now. If it's under different management, it might have changed as well. Because sometimes that happens too when they change.
Yeah. Now I know the friends of mine are talking at the current edition of that one, and I know that the scene grew, of course, and obviously so many years ago, the scene was fresh. So people wanted to talk about how to make money online. That was the focus. And it was more American based. And Americans have a big drive for business. Like, they know how to monetize their skills. In Europe, we still have shyness talking about money, how much you make, and, all this thing with credit card rewards and points. Like, every American uses that. But in Europe, like, all my European friends who travel, they never had a lot of points or rewards, unless it's through their job. But we're really prioritizing other things, I guess. So being more in the American space is helping me understand that it's not taboo to talk about work, money, financial goals, financial stability, and all of that, investment. And maybe Americans are learning other things, mingling with Europeans. So it's a nice sharing.
When American, I feel like Europe, you guys have the cheap flights like Ryanair and EasyJet. And then us in the US, we have like the reward programs, like you said, like credit card points, because you guys don't really have that as much. We had another speaker that spoke at our March Summit last year, where she talked about that, where she did mostly, she's based out of Amsterdam, and she does mostly Air France. So that's how she gets most of her points. But she says it's not really big in Europe. It's smaller.
No, as you said, the cheap airlines, you can't even really collect the points and miles, but then you fly for $20 anyway, so.
Yeah, it's like EasyJet, Ryanair, Wizz Air, all the cheap ones. It's kind of like, it's funny because like people say like the cheap airlines and Spirit, it's like Spirit in the US, but then like you're like, no, but in Europe I can actually go further for the distance for the same price as the Spirit in the US. That's short.
I think the US are almost as big as Europe, but in Europe, every few miles, there's a different country. If I think about Italy, all the neighboring countries, I've done sometimes, multiple times, road trips where in the same day, I have lunch, dinner, and breakfast in 3 different countries, just driving a car, because it's just so tiny and neighboring. I mean, I can say it's tiny because when I'm in South America, you fly for hours and you're still in Brazil. Same in China. But in Europe, don't really fly for hours and stay within the same country. So we also travel by train. That's not maybe a big thing in the US, or overnight buses. I take everything in Europe, cars and Flixbus and all of that. The US have different distances.
We're not that great. The US isn't that great for the train wise. Like if you go to the West Coast for the trains and the buses, it's not as good as East Coast. East Coast is a lot better for the trains and the buses and everything.
And I asked a couple of days ago to my audience, what is the topic that you want to learn more about? And I gave 4 options. The problem is not the problem. Like the funny thing is the answers were really equal. Like 4 options were digital nomad lifestyle, solo traveling, traveling on a budget, and ethical travel, sustainable travel. Like, okay, this is giving me a hint that this should be my content pillars, because different people are more interested in different things. So I don't know where I should start talking more, because now I feel like, I want to provide more answers to all these different questions. But as in general, what I'm saying is I want to make myself more available this year to connect with people and helping them. And these are some of the aspects that I'm going to talk more about, because traveling on a budget is useful for so many people, not just for nomads. Like anyone, even just for 1 week, a year vacation, you want to learn from someone who's more experienced how to minimize your cost. So that's for sure something I'm never gonna get tired to share, because sometimes I think it as well from traveling, it's cheaper to live somewhere else than back home. So people think, oh my God, traveling, you need money, but then you're spending so much just to be in an expensive city with your fixed costs every month. Like, I have a glamorous life, that's what you see, but that's not expensive in the places where I am. So you can definitely do it. If you have a month of remote work and you rent out your place, you're gonna live like a king somewhere else. You don't even have to worry about money. So budget traveling, yes. Mindful and sustainable traveling, I'm glad that it's becoming a request, because with over tourism, I'm sure you've seen it, places where animals or the environment or pollution, like stuff, is becoming really visible. So you don't want to be part of the problem, you want to be part of the solution. So how can we not feel guilty? Like, becoming a growing movement, like more nomads and more travelers, how can we have a less of an impact on the places we visit? And this is like another topic that's super important to me. And I think we should always not just think about ourselves when we make a choice, like a tour that we want to join, an activity we want to do, money that we're spending. So being conscious travelers. And this whole digital nomad lifestyle is for people who are curious about it. What I'm saying is you don't have to make harsh decisions. You can test it out for a little while, like traveling long term, especially if you're starting after 30. You don't have to put your body under so much pressure at the beginning. Some people get like huge travel fatigue after just 2 weeks of traveling. So it's more about getting to know yourself. And when you know yourself, no matter where you are, you will be good. If you're still in the phase where you don't know, you can have burnouts. And because I've had that, I give these workshops around mindfulness and taking care of your mind, body needs. And solo traveling, that's the last content pillar. In some countries, it's still kind of a big fear, especially for women. So after I visited Brazil, and I published a little mini guide, how to stay safe in Brazil in 10 simple steps. It's been a couple of years now, and I still get requests, hey, can you send me that guide that you wrote? And it's really just common sense tips. But if I tell you I've been there for weeks and I've felt super comfortable just following these rules, you feel a little bit more empowered. Like, okay, if she could survive there even alone, then maybe we as a couple or friends, or even me alone going there, following these rules, I kind of know that I'm doing the right thing. So I want to write more of these solo travel survival guides, safety guides. And I'm saying all of this just in case anyone is interested in following the journey. This is what you're gonna learn more about in the next months alongside with my travels here around Asia. So I got to Asia in October and I'm still for months roaming around here.
Where can we find you? And do you have an email freebie?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, and then there's a link in bio with the resources. And yeah, there is this PDF Mindful Nomad Blueprint where I explain how to cultivate more self-awareness, cultural awareness, and environmental awareness.
You can get a copy of her session and the replays for all the other 20 different sessions that we have. They're available in the show notes.
Yeah. And then there is this solo travel to Brazil guide. It's also in my link in bio. And I'm preparing a bunch of the things.
All right, awesome. So if you do find that this podcast was very helpful, feel free to leave a podcast rating and review. A lot of us speakers and sponsors, they find us through the podcast. So a lot of the reviews do help us find more speakers so we can have more virtual summits like these. All right, I hope you like this podcast and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. All right, have a good one.